What's up, guys? We're back at it here with another video, and today we're going to be doing reviews on obscure 80s movies, primarily sci-fi and horror, because that's what's big. And really want to talk about 80s movies because I'm fascinated with the 80s, the clothing, the cars, the electronics, just the lifestyle back then, how things were different, how things weren't, politically correct back then. People just made movies to entertain people. Unlike the stuff today, which is garbage compared to what was made back then. So we're gonna do quick reviews on some of the 80s obscure movies in my collection. I could go on all day, but we're just gonna go quick through everything briefly, a couple minutes on each video, and we'll talk about them. I'll give you my honest review. I'm not an expert, but I'm a movie buff. So with that being said, we'll start that off here with a few Betamax movies I have. If anybody doesn't know what a Betamax is, it's it was the alternative platform, the VHS back then, and it didn't do as well. But we're going to talk about some of the movies. The first one here is called Dark Places. This one was done, I believe, in 1984. This was basically about a guy who inherits a house, and there's supposed to be like hidden treasure, and the woman in this picture tries to steal it from her, and I believe the guy that plays Count Dooku is in this movie from Star Wars. But and she kind of tries to seduce him, and the house is haunted. So that's just one of the few betas that I have. The next one, this one's kind of like the movie Christine. This one predates that. This one's called Dark of the Night, and it's basically about this single woman who purchases a vintage Jaguar and ends up being possessed, and she sees ghosts and things in the back of it, and she can't get rid of the car. So that's another one there, and you can see the artwork on the back. She looks scared to death of the car here, but it's similar to the movie Christine, which we'll be talking about later here, but this one kind of is a similar platform. Now this last one's a really weird beta that I have. I don't think you'd consider it a horror movie, but it's like a murder type of... It's a very weird... It's called The Hospital. This one, I believe, was done in 1972. That's what look at the back of got this thing up here, the back of the artwork. 1972. And this is a really weird movie. It's basically about a defunct hospital. You thinking that you watch the movie as it plays, and you think it's a failing hospital. You think there's a bunch of medical malpractice going on, and there's all this bullshit, fraud, things like that. People start dying. And it's a real interesting twist. End up somebody being possessed. A guy's got psychosis or something. He starts, he's being told to kill all these people in a hospital. So it's got all those twists and turns, and it's just a really weird movie. The daughter of the daughter of the killer, she's got head issues. So it's definitely a really weird movie for back in the 70s. Alright, so we'll start with the sci-fi collection that I have here. This one, if you're a Apollo or space conspiracy theorist, this is the movie for you. This is called Capricorn 1, and it's not about the moon landing. This is actually about going to Mars, and I believe, when was this one done? Probably the 70s. Right around this was probably done around the Apollo time. But this one was about a shuttle launch to Mars, and basically, I guess the government decided, this was going to be staged. Apparently they decided to scrap it, and that the shuttle crashed and the crew died on the way back or something like that. So, and then eventually the astronauts say we're not having any part of this, and they escape, and so the government slowly starts killing them off. Now, the main reason I got this, and a lot of people, like I said, obscure movies. I got this for one reason. One of the actors in here, most people know this person because of the murders and everything. O.J. Simpson actually played a role in this. He was one of the astronauts who does get captured and killed. And he's on the left there. I didn't even know O.J. Simpson was I knew he did football. I learned about him through the murders, but I didn't know he played in movies, so I just got this just to see that. That's what fascinated me about this movie. But definitely, if you're a conspiracy theorist, you like that Apollo type stuff, this is the movie for you. This next one here, this is a really weird, obscure movie. It's called Saturn III. It's about this couple that's assigned to work in this space station just outside of Saturn on the rings or something. And they're romantically involved, and I guess eventually their jobs are going to be phased out by this robot. Whole thing was just really weird with this movie, the way the astronauts dressed, but the robot, I'll try to zoom up on the artwork there. I guess he's like possessed or something and tries to kill everybody. And the pilot, has his issues that come, that brings all the equipment in. It's just a very weird kind of sci-fi-ish movie for the 80s. And I don't have a date on here, but definitely this was, if you're into that stuff, definitely something different. Now, this movie is probably a little bit more well-known. It's a classic, but a lot of the younger generation, or even people maybe my age, don't know about this. This next movie is called Short Circuit. It's a classic. Now, some of the younger people, or people my age, may know WALL-E. This movie kind of seems like it was inspired WALL-E, but basically that's exactly what this movie's about, Short Circuit. They had these robots that were built by the military for weapon purposes, and one of them shorts out, number 5. Johnny number 5 shorts out. He's found by somebody. He starts learning about people, and he develops emotions and things that robots typically don't have. And then the government's they're hell-bent on getting this thing back, and they don't want to give it back. And so this was a classic movie. And so they did a sequel, Short Circuit 2. Johnny 5 has to learn how to survive in the city. So a really good classic movie. Unlike the stuff they make now with robots and everything. Alright, so this next one's definitely an interesting movie. This one's called Fahrenheit 451. This one was done in the 60s, 1966. This was basically a sci-fi-ish kind of movie about the world in the future without books. Books were basically illegal, as you can see on the cover art. An officer is burning them. And so basically what this is about is one of the officers, who's higher up, starts reading, gets his hands on a little contraband and starts reading books, and he becomes fascinated. And there's these communities out there where people just, because they can't have physical literature, they literally memorize it in their heads. So this is definitely an interesting one. You haven't seen it, Fahrenheit 451. Good movie. This one I really liked because it had the VHS, VCR type theme to it. This one's called Remote Control. It was done in the late 80s. Basically, it was about this, there was like a movie, a VHS, that was distributed to rental stores across the country. And basically, if you watch the movie, I think you either get murdered or died or something to that extent. And then this guy, our main character here, tries to put an end to that. And I don't remember if it was aliens that were doing it or if it was the government. But this was definitely an interesting movie. you know, for back then. This next one, I really like this movie. It was from, I believe, the 70s. I have a date on it. It's got to be at least the 70s. The Andromeda Strain. Really good movie. Basically, there's this little town or little city where this virus hits. And they send a crew in to investigate what happened, and they find a baby and an older man, and so they're basically tasked with researching why these people have immunity to this virus. And I guess the virus eventually gets out of control and it mutates and it's alien or foreign in nature. But this was a really good movie for for back then. You got to see what life was like in the 70s. You got the cool plot and everything, and you get to see them. They're going, down this almost like bunker. They go from one stage to the next, and it's kind of like a decontamination process. So they really did a good job putting this together, as if it was some kind of doomsday type situation. Now, this next movie was an interesting one. It kind of had a very sad ending. It's called Silent Running. And this one's from I believe the 70s. If I'm not mistaken, 71. And it had very good visual effects, pictures, and everything. And it was, like I said, a very sad movie. It was basically about, and you can see it, they had these little biodomes, like little outer space kind of areas where wildlife would live, plants, trees, animals, because they didn't have that on Earth anymore. And so I guess the government sat there and said, we're scrapping this. All these domes need to be replaced. So the caretaker, one of the crew members, decides to go rogue and takes out the crew, commandeers the station, and he's living by himself for like a year or so. And the only, it's sad. He's isolated, doesn't have anybody. He just killed all these people, and he's got two drones that are kind of like R2-D2 type drones that are helping him maintain the ship and the facility. And they're actually Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And one of them gets wiped out. It's sad. He ends up committing suicide, and the drone basically takes over the caretaking jobs. It has a very sad ending with this movie, but definitely interesting for a 70s sci-fi type movie. Right, so this next one, this movie's from the 50s, I believe. 1951. It's called When Worlds Collide. This was actually a pretty good movie. It's almost like Noah's Ark in outer space. Basically, there's a planet or I don't know if it's a meteorite or asteroid that's going to collide with Earth. So their only option is actually land on this foreign planet. And they can, like I said, they have one rocket. They have enough resources to build one rocket. And they can only take, X amount of people, animals on there to this new planet. So there's this big struggle of who gets to go on the Ark, who doesn't. So it's kind of like Noah's Ark in outer space. A really cool movie from back in the 50s. There's a romance type theme to it. Alright, so this next one is an absolute must watch. I really like this. This is another kind of survival virus type movie. It is called Virus. That's what it's called. Absolute must watch. This was in 1980. This was done in 1980. And this one is basically about a virus a very deadly virus that escapes and basically wipes out pretty much the entire population. And they did a really good job with this because you get to see how it affects everything. You see people in the White House or in the highest levels of government getting sick. So eventually what happens is they find out that the virus is susceptible to the cold. It can't survive in extreme cold. So whoever's left of the survivors, they all go to a base in Antarctica and they've got to figure out how to survive, how to reproduce, this and that, and eventually they have to go back because I think a nuclear reactor or something goes off, and they have to go back into the into the inland to shut it off, and that eventually they develop a vaccine. So this is a very good movie for back then. I highly recommend this one. It's called Virus. Then we have another very good, a very interesting virus type movie. This one is called Warning Signs, and this basically involves a virus that escapes a lab, and it basically turns all the researchers and scientists into like psychotic serial killers, basically. And one of the researchers has to go in and figure out, figure out what the hell's going on. So you got him in the picture there. That's the artwork. But this is a definitely interesting movie for back then. Alright, so you're into the end of the world doomsday survival type of movie. This one's for you. This is called DEFCON 4. It's kind of a weird type of movie, basically. I can't remember if it's the U.S. going against Russia, but all hell breaks out. Nuclear war happens. I guess the U.S. is hit first by the opposing, and so the people, there's a space station. They have like a spit with nuclear missiles on it, and they get the authorization, the nuclear codes to launch. So they launch back, and then they're up in this space, in the space station, figuring out what the hell to do. Are people still alive down there? So eventually they go down, and there's, it's a very weird movie because, everybody's kind of gone rogue. You've got nuclear winter going on, as you can see. You've got all these survivalist, lunatic nut job people. It's a really weird movie. It wasn't one of my favorites, but it was definitely something different. This next movie kind of had a sad beginning. It's called Rage. I think it's from the 1972. So some of these movies we're doing from the 80s and back. So it's not all 80s, but anything pre 1989 and back will be in this video. But Rage, it's a very sad movie. Basically, the government is doing. I haven't watched this in a long time, but it's a government experiment that went bad, and this guy happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He very sad. You can see the picture there. He's out on a hunting or a camping trip with his son, and they get exposed to this. And it basically kills everything: farm animals, livestock, his dog. His son gets mortally ill and dies. He didn't get as exposed to it, so he's slowly dying from it. So what does this guy do? He says, I'm taking out these bastards that did this. So he ends up going, and taking out the the people that were involved. But yeah, this was a sad, to watch his son die like that. Definitely a good movie. It's called Rage. So that was another one. So this next one, I would not recommend, but it was definitely something different. It's called the Aurora Encounter. Now my case is pretty bad on this. So it's called the Aurora Encounter, and it featured the guy Spanky, who played in the original Little Rascals. He was one of the actors, but you look at the back here, and you'll see the boy or the guy right there. That is not CGI. That's not makeup. There's an interesting story about this. The backstory on this movie is this guy. This guy had an illness that made him look older, and this was, his make-a-wish. His wish, he wanted to be in movies. He wanted to be in the movies. So they put him in this movie, and basically it was about an alien that was exploring during Little House on the Prairie times, so like the late 1800s. When there was no technology and lights and bells and whistles. So when people saw this UFO, they didn't know what to think of it. So it was kind of a sad thing. Some of the people, one of the guys shot and killed the alien. They wanted to take over his technology. So just a really sad movie. It was weird. I wouldn't. It's not the greatest movie, but it just had an interesting backstory on the guy. He passed away years ago. I think in 1992 from his illness. He had a rare disease. I don't know what the disease was at off the top of my head. All right. So this next one is called Project X, and this features Matthew Broderick. If anybody doesn't know who he is, I think he's the voice of Aladdin in the movie, and then he also plays in Godzilla. Uh, Basically, he's in Air Force. He's in the Air Force. He does something stupid, and he gets demoted, so he basically has to clean up after the apes, or the chimps. And so he actually develops a bond with them. But then he finds out what they're being used for. They're being used to be tested with radiation. So he's like, so he kind of goes, goes rogue again and breaks out all the chimps and tries to rescue them. I think this one chimp had exceptional high IQ. He was able to do things that the others couldn't do. So that's why, he had that special bond with them. So definitely an interesting movie. This next one was kind of a weird movie. It's called Future World. So basically, I think about like killer robots and these different type of zones, and there was some kind of cover up. I haven't watched this one in a while, but it's definitely a different type of movie. I thought it was okay. Like I said, I haven't watched this in a while, but Future Zone, really cool movie. Then there's Alien Nation. So basically, this one I haven't watched in a while either, but basically this group of aliens crash lands here. They have to coexist with humans, and I guess there's some kind of cover-up or Ponzi scheme, and that's the guy from Misery. He has to work with an alien cop, so they kind of have to work together to they have to figure it out. Like I said, I haven't watched this movie in a long time. And that one was done in the late 80s. Alright, so this movie, I really had a hard time wrapping my head around. There were so many twists and turns. Such a weird movie. This one's called Life Force. This was like an alien type vampire thing, basically. The aliens got to the people or whoever their host. They vapor. I can't remember. Like I said, my head was so twisted with this one. They found this life form or this life force in an abandoned spaceship in outer space. They bring it back down. They escape and they move from body to body, and then the host body like vaporizes. That's the best of what I can recall from the movie. Very weird. And then the government's trying to track it down and figure out what it is. So it's just definitely an interesting movie. I had a hard time wrapping my head around it. And so this next one, it's a clamshell version, but this is also an obscure movie. It's called The Bees. I think it's got to be from the 70s at least. Yeah, 78. So it's called The Bees, and it was basically about this new hybrid bee that they were trying to experiment with or produce that made more honey or something. I can't remember. And so they, ended up killing people, killing the beekeepers down there, or people that broke in, tried to steal the bees, ended up killing them. And so they imported the bees in the United States and they started taking over. So they had to figure out a way to take out the bees. I honestly think the ending really fell kind of flat on this one, but it was definitely a different movie. Alright, so the last one that I'm going to talk about, this one's probably a classic that some people may have heard of. I couldn't, this is another really weird kind of movie. It's called 2001 Space Odyssey. Basically, it's about, I don't know, it's like how the world started and, how the world ended, monoliths and aliens and monkeys, whacking tapers with sticks. From people going in outer space being abducted, and you've got HAL 9000, the corrupted computer that's trying to take out the crew. Just so many weird things. It leaves you asking more. At the end of the movie, it seems like you're asking more questions. You're asking more questions than you get answers. It's like at the end of the movie. So it's definitely different. And this is a big box version here. But they did a sequel called 2010, The Year We Make Contact. And this was basically, they had to go back, find the original, spaceship, fix the corrupted HAL 9000, and interact with figure out what the hell was going on down there. So just really different kind of sci-fi movie with a lot of twists, and you ask a lot of questions versus what answers you get from that movie. So definitely something different. With that being said, we're going to go to our horror movie collections here. And this first one, I have not seen it yet, but it's definitely a very obscure movie. It's called The Pit. And when was this one done? This was done in 1981. This gives you real perspective on things, because this, you hear about autism and things like that nowadays more frequently than ever, and we have a better understanding of, mental illness and things like that. But to see a movie that actually has somebody, portray somebody with autism, a horror movie, is something different for way back then. Because back then, people addressed mental illness and disorders as just somebody being different or a little bit more hyper than everybody else. But, I haven't seen this one, but basically it's about a autistic boy that gets picked on. He ends up finding this pit somewhere that has this monster. So he takes the bullies there, and the monster eats them. Like I said, I haven't seen it. I'm saving this one for when I'm ready to watch it. But it's definitely an obscure movie, and the autism kind of thing gives you a little interest. Like, they really knew about autism back then, so it's just something different, Alright, so the next one here is, if you saw the In the Dark of the Night, I believe it was called, the car movie, this is Christine. This is the 80's copy of a movie called Christine. And this was basically about a possessed 57 Cadillac or 57 Chevy. And it was like a romance, horror, murder, killer car thing. Only thing is, the romance wasn't with two people. It was with the car, and whoever owned the car became obsessed with it. And this is definitely an interesting movie, because this car had, was psychotic from the day it rolled out of the assembly line. Somebody's working on the fucking thing and their arm gets all messed up. Another guy gets in there to do more work, just sits in there, dies. Carbon monoxide poisoning or something. He doesn't ever get back out of the car. So basically, this young guy gets it from another guy who actually, his brother died while owning the car. He gets it. He starts to become possessed about it. And anybody that gets in the way of him in the car ends up getting So definitely an interesting movie, and you get to see the whole aspect. Like they had a do-it-yourself garage, which is something I've never seen. You could actually go in, store your car, work on it there. Something that just not typically seen now. So it's definitely just something different. But interesting movie. Alright, so this next one is a really weird movie. It's not more of a horror, but it's like a murder, thriller, kind of twisted movie. It's called Dead Ringers. It's basically about these two brothers who are like renowned gynecologists. This is for the twisted. They help women with their reproductive systems, and they're intertwined in this relationship with this woman, and she's got all sorts of mental health issues, and ends up, being drug addiction, and it gets so bad, to the point where this guy's like all messed up in the head. He's making these weird gynecological instruments with museum art, and eventually, it ends pretty bad. One brother kills the other. I think they both die in the end. But it's a really weird, twisted movie. And you look at the box art, and you look at how they operated on people back then. They're wearing the red robes and garments, almost like in Star Wars, the Emperor's Royal Guards. So it gives it that extra kind of creepy, kind of scary factor there with the red robes. I don't know if they wore that back then, but most of the scrubs that you see now, it's blue, green, purple. You don't see that when they have the whole kind of shroud thing like the Emperor's Royal Guard. All right, so this next movie is another one I have not seen, but it definitely intrigued me just looking at the box art. It's called To Kill a Clown. It's a thriller, murder, cult kind of movie. This couple gets stranded on this island, and the only people there is this crazy guy with Dobermans. Like I said, this is from the 80's. Real cool movie. Haven't seen it. I'm saving it. I just got it. But definitely like the box art. I hope the movie's as good as it looks. Another movie that I have here that I'm also saving, if, they don't make movies, there's that Cocaine Bear movie, but this is a real Cocaine Bear type, horror movie. This one's called Grizzly. It was done in the 80's. Haven't seen it. I'm saving it. But it's about this murderous grizzly bear. But I just got this one, and I'm saving it for a special occasion when I'm ready to watch it. Alright, so this next one, this is a must-have. I highly, highly recommend it. A lot of people know Stephen King for movies like It, Pet Sematary, but people don't know about the movie The Dead Zone. This one was a really good movie. You get a real good look at the 80's, how people dressed, how people lived. It's had an overall really good plot, everything. That's why Stephen King is, the master of horror. This was a really good movie, and it starred Christopher Walken. And basically, the guy had everything going for him. He had a good job as a high school or a college professor. He's in head over heels in love with his girlfriend. Then all of a sudden, bam! He gets hit by a car, and he's almost killed, and he's in a coma for 5 years. And the guy wakes up, and his whole world has come apart. He's got to learn to walk, do everything again. And then his girl shacks up with another guy, has a kid. And then he's got to see his parents, who he hasn't seen in 5 years because he's been in a coma. But he ends up getting a gift. If he touches somebody, he can see their future or see the past, and he's able to figure out who somebody's mother is. He's able to solve crime, and even in the end saves the world from nuclear war. But this is a very good movie. Everything about it, the plot, the acting, the scenery, the family interaction, everything. This was a good movie. I highly recommend it. All right, so this next one is called Rosemary's Baby. This one, I believe, was done in the 60s, and it was basically about this woman who was about to give birth, and the baby is the people that she's with. Uh, they're trying to use the baby to resurrect the demon. As you can see there, they're holding her down on the right. But this was definitely an interesting movie. I really like the cover art on it, and this was done in the 60s, 1968. So this is not obviously, they didn't have VHS back then. It wasn't until the 70s. Alright, so this next movie is probably one of my favorite. I grew up with it. You don't see a lot of horror western movies. Like I said, all-time favorite. This one is called Ghost Town. I really like the cover art on it. Basically, what this movie is about. This movie was filmed in the late 80s, so like 87. But basically, it was about this ghost town that couldn't rest until this guy named Devlin was killed, and he basically kidnaps this local woman because he needs a new bride. And our main actor, Frank Luntz, has to go in. He's recruited by the now deceased sheriff to kill Devlin. So everything, this was overall a really good movie. The acting, the horror factor. You go in and Frank's in the jail. You see all the skeletons and desert scenes. Everything was just beautifully done with this movie. And Devlin was creepy as heck. There he is right there. Hard to see him. But he had the scar on the front of the face from when he got shot. You know. So it was just overall, good special effects, everything. Good plot. And it's just a sentimental thing because I grew up with this movie. This was a movie that my dad watched, so I think about him with this one. So definitely, an overall good, one of the few horror western movies out there. Definitely a good movie. I don't know where it was shot, if it was shot in Arizona or not, but definitely good, really good movie. I highly recommend watching it. Alright, so this next one is called The Manitou. This is a really weird movie. This is a lot like Rosemary's Baby, because basically this woman gives birth to the reincarnation of some Indian voodoo witch doctor guy, and they have to use good magic to try and stop him, but she ends up giving birth to him. It's such a weird movie, and this one was done in don't know if it was the 70s or 80s, but it was definitely very weird. And you can see the box art there. You can see the Manitou right there. Definitely a very weird movie, but it was similar to Rosemary's Baby in that sense. Alright, so this next one is called House. I think it was about a guy living in a haunted house. I think they've done like at least maybe 3 or 4 sequels to this. I only have the first one. Not a whole lot to it, but definitely an interesting movie. Don't have a lot to say about it. It was just alright. And then this one was very interesting. Everybody knows Wes Craven is the guy that did the Freddy movies, but this was a Wes Craven movie called Deadly Friend. Deadly Friend. It is basically about this girl that was killed and this gifted high school student. They were friends, and he's, I think I can't remember if he was working at the hospital there or interning, but basically he does something to bring her back to life, and so she kind of gets revenge on the people that killed her. So definitely an interesting movie, and you can see she's possessed there in the back. So definitely interesting movie. And so the last two obscure horror movies that I have are this one here. This is a very interesting one. And they did these old movie, everybody sees them, their ex-movie rentals. Basically, these cases were used to put a security device on so you couldn't steal the cassette and people collect them. But this one is called Ruby. It's a drive-in movie theater slasher horror movie. Basically, what happens is these guys kill somebody, and it's like a mafia type thing. They dump the body in the river. I can't remember. And so the dead spirit or whatever slowly starts killing off all these people years later at this drive-in movie theater one by one. But definitely an interesting movie. And the last one that I have is this movie called Sentinel. Basically, it was about this possessed apartment, and they basically had a priest or a nun watch over it, and the priest blind, but that, didn't say anything, didn't ever leave the apartment. Basically, they were an entity there to prevent these demons from entering our world. And so this woman here, she's the new recruit to become the next nun to watch over the apartment. And it's just very weird. They have weird neighbors and everything. And this one was done in the 70s, I believe. But definitely something very different with that one. But yeah, that is the bulk of the obscure movies that I have from the 80s. We'll probably do movies from the 90s in the next video, but I really just kind of wanted to encompass those, as part of, a lot of electronic stuff that I do. But I just want people to have an appreciation for the past. The 80s, that just kind of fascinates me. The technology back then, the clothing, how people lived, the cars, just that different, lifestyle. Plus, I was born in the 80s, so it's just, different time period that I kind of fascinated with. Plus, how they made the movies back then is way different than how they made the movies now. The quality, the acting, everything is so much better back then than it is now. And I just wanted to share a little bit of my collection with you guys in this first video.